Look, first of all, thank you for taking the time to talk tonight, this evening. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about Imran Khan? Was he a reform candidate? And also, why was he so neutral in regards to the Russian invasion?
Okay, so sorry, Jason, can I ask just for the music in the
Oh,
background to
I'm going to drop it out right now.
drop it out a bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. So yeah, about Imran Khan. So thank you so much, first of all, for having me, because it's a complex situation and a complex issue with a complex social history. And I would start. Sometimes there's well, of course we were talking about Marx before I got on, and Marx has this quote from the Jewish Question, which I really like, which is that the formulation, and he says at one point, he says that the formulation of a question is its own solution. So sometimes the questions, when we are asking perhaps not the right questions, then we are also not getting the correct answers, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So with the Imran Khan situation as well, a lot of the people on the Western left, they kind of end up asking the wrong questions, right? So for example, with this issue of the US, it will become clear as we talk on. But in terms of your question about the reform candidate, right? So Imran Khan has historically, he was the head of what I would call a kind of center right populist movement, which was at its core, it was based in Pakistan's middle classes, newly emergent middle classes, which have emerged from the 90s, 2000s, 2010s onwards, due to various other processes like economic liberalization and urbanization in Pakistan. But of course, like all populist movements, it also had a popular base, right? And like all populist movements, it was a movement which kind of positioned itself as a reform movement, but in power, it was a continuity movement, if you see what I mean, right? This is often the fate, often what happens with populist movements, because if they don't come in with a coherent program and with a coherent coalition of social forces which can upend the existing elites, then they often end up pandering to those existing elites, if you see what I mean, right? So with the Imran Khan movement, this is almost exactly what happens. This is a candidate, this is a person who has, wild support in particular sections of Pakistan, and in large sections of Pakistan middle class through the 90s, 2000s, increasing in the 2000s, 2010s. He's a national hero because he's a cricket World Cup winning captain. He's one of the legendary cricketers, one of the great cricketers of all time. But also his rise is also related to the wider kind of crisis of the Pakistani ruling bloc, in which the relationship to the US is a big part of the puzzle, and we can talk about that later. But because Pakistan's ruling bloc basically is dependent on funds and patronage from imperialism, it has been for the past 70 years, and at least for the past 50 years, and arguably for the past 70 years since independence. And that kind of dependency on the US and Western powers has been changing through the 2000s, 2010s, and that kind of imperial cement has fallen off for the Pakistan ruling bloc. There was a wider crisis in society, in politics, in which Imran Khan emerges as this kind of hero of the middle class. But then, crucially, in his ascension to power in the mid 2010s, towards the late 2010s, he forms basically an alliance with the Pakistani military. And for those of you who don't know, Pakistani military is basically the most entrenched political and economic player in the country. It is the biggest economic interest. It has interests in all of the sectors of the Pakistan's economy. It is like a 20, $30 billion economic conglomerate. It has been the seat of kind of imperial American patronage and American aid, and fought wars for America in the region. And Imran Khan, and it also patronizes this kind of huge network of politicians, elite brokers, middlemen, and so on and so forth. And Imran Khan's movement basically forms an alliance with the military and these kind of political brokers around the military, big landed elites, big capitalist elites, and so on, in his first stint in power. Right. But the issue is that the wider crisis that I'm talking to you about, which is an economic crisis, a political crisis, an ideological crisis, but fundamentally an economic crisis, uh, he is not able to solve that while in power, fundamentally because he's dependent on the military, which is the most problematic part of the coalition itself. And of course, because as a middle class kind of populist figure, Imran Khan and his party also don't have a coherent program to get out of the morass that Pakistan are in. And fundamentally, what happens is that Imran Khan falls out with the military 3 years into his rule, and that is then what then sets the ball rolling for his removal. Now, the case of the US here is, debatable. I mean, that Intercept, what do you call it?
The
That
article
Intercept,
that I agree
yeah,
with.
that Intercept cipher, that Intercept
Yeah.
document is correct, obviously. But if you read it, what's happening there is that Donald Lu, this person who has a record of threatening third world governments and third world people, he's done that before in Nepal as well. There was an article on the BBC about this. Imran Khan had this no confidence motion. But anyway, uh, the role of the US here is debatable. Of course, absolutely, the US was not happy with Imran Khan and in the Ukraine situation. But the thing is, because Imran was so reliant on the military, and in Pakistan, foreign policy is always set by the military, right? So it wasn't as if that Imran Khan was doing some, amazing Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez type reorientation of Pakistani foreign policy. It was the statement that he gave, and Pakistan would already have voted neutral on Ukraine, and I can tell you why. Because Pakistan, as I said, has been historically dependent on the US, and it has supported US in its regional wars, like in Afghanistan, more specifically in the 80s and 2000s. But then if you look at the, for example, Yemen war, which has been happening for the last 10 years, right? And with the Saudis going after Yemenis and bombing them with American and UK support, the Saudis actually asked Pakistan for help in the previous prime minister's stint, the Nawaz Sharif's stint before Imran Khan. And Pakistan did not agree at that point, right? So my point is that Pakistan's relationship with America, with these kind of wider regional wars, has been complex. So what happens with that Donald Lu meeting is happening in the context where already there are moves afoot from the late 2022 onwards, from the late 2021 onwards, for the removal of Imran Khan, because one, he has been dependent on the military, and by the end of 2021 he basically falls out with the military. He falls out with the military for a number of reasons. One of them is internal appointments of the military. So the military wanted to change its intelligence office, intelligence chief. Imran Khan didn't want to change the intelligence chief because the intelligence chief was a close ally of Imran Khan. So he didn't want to change the intelligence chief, but the military put its step down. The other issue was that because of the wider kind of discontent that happened, was that preceded Khan and marked his time in power, as I said, right? Because as I said, Khan comes to power on the back of this wider crisis. And his stint in power is really unstable because, as I said, he's reliant on the military, he's reliant on these elite brokers and so on and so forth. And one of the biggest issues is that his government is very weak in the Punjab province, which is the biggest province of Pakistan. That's the central province.
Okay.
And that's also the province from which the military does most of its recruitment, right? So overwhelming majority of the military, its officers, its soldiers come from Punjab. And in Punjab, Khan's government was especially chaotic. It had almost, it was a coalition government which was about 4 or 5, factions within the government itself. And that kind of wider discontent was also translating into the military, into political recalculations. And then, of course, the final straw is that Khan falls out with the army chief over this issue of internal appointments. And that is really then what sets afoot this motion of no confidence. But that is already happening at the end of 2021, early 2022, and then the Ukraine thing happens in February, March. So that is the wider context in which all of this is happening. And I think it's kind of simplistic and often can be misleading to see all of this as something, that somehow America switched something on in the State Department and something happened in Islamabad. That is unfortunately not how history and politics works. We have to look at what I call the intersection of economic structure and social history to understand what has been happening.